A brief background to this event tonight. As non-state actors, by non-state actors I'm talking of the civil society. I've been working with academia, been working with the private sector and the government in making sure that we support the government of Malawi. So all of us as stakeholders, working with the government of Malawi to make sure that we have the disaster risk management bill enacted so that we have a disaster risk management act. Why is that important? This is because the disaster risk management sector as at now is being governed, if I may call it that. The legislative instrument that's there governing governing disaster risk management in the country is what I would call archaic because it's a 1991 act. So this 1991 act, the focus is mainly on responding to disasters. So the focus basically is just on responding to disasters when they occur in the country. And that also means that as a country, we're not focusing more on being prepared for the disasters. Our focus as of now is that we need to prepare for disasters. We need to plan. We also need to build our resilience in making sure that we reduce the risks and vulnerabilities that are there within the country, within communities, upon infrastructures, upon ecosystems that may, in one way or the other, increase our risks to disasters. Specifically, of course, we've been focusing on climate-related disasters, but going beyond that, I think we've witnessed that disasters have gone beyond climate-related. We've had the COVID-19, now we're talking about cholera. So all these are disasters that need to be managed and be governed in a very systematic way. So I did mention that the archaic 1991 Act focuses more on responding to disasters. By way of responding to disasters, what mainly happens is that we also have an issue of financing for this sector, for the disaster risk management sector. So for the archaic, the 1991 Act only provides for financing into the disaster risk management sector to come in through what is called the unforeseen vote. So the unforeseen vote is just basically a basket that the government instituted. It's there, it's established, it's there mainly to provide for or to finance unforeseen circumstances, if I may call it that. So all unforeseen circumstances receive or get funding from there. So what happens mostly is that it's usually, almost often, an empty basket. Because for disasters, when disasters occur, that's when funding comes in from development partners, from other countries that want to support Malawi. So it's often an empty basket. So for the disaster risk management bill that we have been advocating for, supporting the government to develop, and now we're talking about having it enacted. The focus of this disaster risk management bill is that it's focusing on building resilience and making sure that we reduce the risks to these disasters, to the hazards that come with climate-related disasters, even beyond that, but also providing for financing, predictable financing, reliable financing that's dedicated to disaster risk management. So there are a lot of things that are important, beneficial for us, that provide one opportunity for us to manage our disasters in the country more effectively. So we've been doing a lot of engagements with the government, lobbying for the passing of this bill. Maybe just to give a background to that, the process started way, way back. The very initial activities towards the development of this act, of this bill, because it's still a bill, though we've been told that it's not a bill. So the very initial engagement started way back in 2013. So we're talking about, I don't know how many years has it been. So we're still talking about this still being a draft disaster risk management bill. It has not been enacted yet. And we are in a very sorry state because as it is, I think we've already witnessed the fact that disasters have become so recurrent, so frequent, and we should expect more of that. Because the report by the IPCC, the most recent report, has indicated that we should expect more of the impacts that we've been experiencing due to climate change. We should be expecting more in the frequency as well as in magnitude of all those events, which means as if we were talking about cyclones, talking about extreme weather events, wherever we may be thinking of, we should be expecting more frequent of those events, and also events that have increased in magnitude. That poses a challenge, a very high risk for us as a country on disasters as a country. So that's an area that we also need to make sure that we keep at the back of our minds as we are talking about this disaster risk management bill tonight. So looking at all those situations and all those issues, and even recently, even with the the Department of Climate Change and Meteorological Services, in the forecast that they released for the 2022-2023, they did mention to say that for this year alone, for this rainfall season, the forecast indicated that we should be expecting not less than 5 tropical cyclones. Last year, I think we suffered, 3, but for this year, we've been notified that we should expect not less than 5 tropical cyclones or storms. So that's something that we also need to be keeping at the back of our minds. That's something that we'll be facing as a country. And with all that, in all that context as a country, we still do not have a legislative instrument that's responding to disasters based on the current situation. Because at this point, you cannot just be waiting and just be hit by disasters and then we respond. We would want to be proactive in the sense that we prepare for disasters by building our resilience. So that's the main focus of the disaster risk management bill. And going beyond that, as I've already mentioned, we've had so many engagements, even with parliamentarians, with government MDAs, and all the different stakeholders that we've been engaging on this issue of disaster risk management. But the problem that we've been having is that somehow there seems to be some, I don't know the right word to use, but I'll still use the word resistance from the government in the sense that there have been a lot of back and forth on this disaster risk management bill going forward, and then it goes from disaster risk management, the institution that's responsible for that, DODMA, going into the Ministry of Justice, and then cabinet committee, full cabinet, then it goes back. So there have been all those processes, and that's delaying the enactment of this bill. And that's a very unfortunate position for us as a country. And that's not the place that we want to be. Because the delay simply means that we also delaying or accepting that we still want to continue to be hit by disasters and continue to lose lives and continue to lose property and continue to lose resources. Just because we choose to still use an act that's very, I would use the word outdated, because it does not speak to the current situation of responding to disasters. So very recently, we had a meeting in Mponera, must have been on the 24th of November this year. So in that meeting, the focus was, or the idea was that we come together with the government, the Ministry of Justice, because the bill as it is right now is still with the Ministry of Justice. So we need to come together with government just to make sure that we cleared as on what challenges are there, what's hindering the bill from being enacted. That if there are challenges, we come together, stakeholders, we discuss those and then map a way forward, find a way, and make sure that we have this bill enacted. So in that meeting, unfortunately, we were unable to have the Ministry of Justice because of other reasons, and we were unable to have also the Department of Disaster Management Affairs was also not represented. As a result, it was just turned into a planning meeting for non-state actors. So basically what we thought of doing was that we also partner with different local stakeholders, including the media, in making sure that you support us or work on this cause, because all of us are stakeholders in this cause of disaster risk management in the country, that you support us in this fight. We're not fighting against the government, but we want to support the government, somehow possibly giving the government a push forward for us to have this bill enacted. And this is why we are here tonight. But also just to mention that this week, on Tuesday, we had a meeting with members of parliament. Of course, that was not organized by Cisonecc, but one of the CSOs in the country did organize that and brought the parliamentarians on board just to discuss this issue. And in that meeting, we had the Ministry of Justice present. And to the disappointment of many of us, the Minister of Justice did mention to say that as it is, as a country, we do not have the disaster risk management bill. It's not a bill. We all thought that somehow we had advanced the stage, but then looking at, with the indications that came from the Minister of Justice, showed that as a country, we don't even have the bill at all. So I did mention that the bill passed all those other steps some years back, was in 2019, and then it was sent back. So it gone to a point whereby it was a bill, and then it got back to a point whereby now where we're told that it's still in drafting, there's still a drafting process that's going on. So it's a very unfortunate position for us as a country, because in that very meeting, the Minister of Justice also did highlight some things to say. Yeah, this year alone, they have been able to process and present into Parliament 47 bills. That's what they mentioned. So it was very disappointing for us as stakeholders in this sector to note that out of the 47 bills, the disaster risk management bill is not one of those bills. So somehow it's not seen as a priority for the government, but it's an area that has to be seen as a priority. So passing, we're not saying all the others are not important, but this is also a very, very important bill. And just to hear that there's still process of drafting, that was a very, very disappointing statement from the Minister of Justice. So that's basically where we are at the moment. So this event tonight we've organized just so we can help possibly some of you understand, in case you have not been involved in all these discussions, so that you help us as we partner in this cause of making sure that we have this bill enacted as a country. So we have a communique that was developed, and it was developed in that planning meeting. It was a product of the planning meeting. It was developed, also published in the newspaper. But right here, we want to disseminate that, make sure that you understand that, but also help us to make sure that we give the government the necessary push for this disaster risk management bill to go forward and to be finalized. And so that possibly by next year, we should be talking about, implementation, and not just talking about it still being a draft or not being a draft at all. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to the national coordinator, who is now going to go through read the first part of the communique. I hope you've been shared with the communique. So it's going to read the first part of the communique, and then the colleagues will also help out with that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth, for that very comprehensive background to the issue. And I felt like I don't need to add anything to it, because I think she has actually ably presented the issues that are actually not going well with us as civil society. I was telling the colleagues in the planning meeting that I'm one of the very disappointed individuals, but also citizens in this country, because the 2013 that is being mentioned here, I think we're the first people to support government to develop the initial drafts of this disaster risk management bill. I individually, but also through our the network itself. And I think going through the process from 2013 until now, you can actually sense the disappointment, because at that moment we felt like it is going to be enacted in 2 years' time or in 3 years' time. But now we are talking about 10 years down the line, and it's still a push. So I will just read the first part of the communique, and then I'll tackle the first issue. I'll make my simple reflections and then pass it to my colleagues. Yeah, so thank you. I will not read the first part, but we'll just say the rest of the statement. So we recognize the need for multi-stakeholder involvement in the formulation and implementation of various climate change and disaster risk management policy frameworks in Malawi, with a particular focus on the implementation of national climate change management policy and the national disaster risk management policy. We acknowledge the importance of the development and implementation of the resilience policies in facilitating the effective coordination, financing, and implementation of multi-sectoral programs to avert the impacts of climate change in Malawi. And we commend the interests and the commitment of government of Malawi in participatory formulation and implementation of the resilience policies, and also support of the development partners through the provision of technical and financial support in developing policies and their implementation. We reiterate as stakeholders our unwavering commitment in the hunt for solutions that seek to reduce the impacts of climate change and enthuse national resilience, thereby mitigate impacts of disasters. We understand that there is an interplay of constraining technical, financial, and political factors, and that there are some capacities and incapacities among us as stakeholders, but we resolve to come together and tap into each other's strength and efforts to enhance national resilience and safeguard human dignity and sustainable future. We are concerned with the resistance by the government of Malawi to have a disaster risk management bill tabled in Parliament, as evidenced by the back and forth engagements between the Department of Disaster Management Affairs and the Ministry of Justice. We also lament that the government of Malawi is losing a lot of resources in disaster-related expenses, a situation which can easily be abated by the provision of the Disaster Risk Management Bill once it's enacted. We therefore present the following demands in relation to the finalization and enactment of the Disaster Risk Management Bill into law, as well as general disaster risk management issues. So the issue number one is about depoliticization of the Disaster Risk Management Bill. The civil society and other stakeholders in disaster risk management sector, as my colleague has already mentioned, started advocating for an enactment of the Disaster Risk Management Bill way back in 2013, and there was a glimpse of hope when the draft bill was gazetted on 10th of May 2019, that it would soon be enacted in the August House. Since then, we have seen there has been back and forth discussions between the Department of Disaster Management Affairs and the Ministry of Justice, which has not yielded any tangible outcome, in an indication that the delay might be caused by lack of political will. The government should seriously consider desisting from politicizing the Disaster Risk Management Bill and then DRM issues in the country. As the CSOs and stakeholders appeal that DODMA, which is the Department of Disaster Management Affairs, should be independent of the political sphere's interference, and the implementation of the bill needs to be free of political interference in all forms, and any relief items that the government is providing should not in any way carry the political names, flags, or colors. Thank you. I will proceed to give it to my colleague because of time.
Thank you, Julius. I think all the contextual issues have been dealt with, but I cannot agree more with both you and Ruth that I think this is a matter of national interest, and therefore it requires serious consideration. So I will take it up from issue number 2, where we want to build a case for why it is important to invest in disaster risk reduction or disaster risk management. As you know, disaster risk issues are cross-cutting issues. They affect every sector of our economy, and also they affect every spheres of our lives. A case in point are the current electricity blackouts because of the damage to the Kapichira hydropower plant. So I think that is illustrative of the need for the country to invest in disaster risk reduction rather than always wait for funding from development partners. So in the past 3 years, Malawi has been hit by devastating tropical storms that have rendered thousands of people displaced, injured, and others dead, destroying their belongings and crop fields. In times of these disasters, civil society organizations, the private sector, development partners, and other well-wishers always show their support and commitment by giving different forms of assistance. Following the various tropical storms, Tropical Storm Anna, Gombe, that we experienced the previous rainy season, over 7 billion kwacha was mobilized for response and recovery. 10 months after those tropical storms or tropical cyclones, the country is yet to recover from the damages. And I did allude to the case of Kabichira, but that's just one of the isolated cases. But there are so many other areas where we are still grappling with the effects of those tropical storms. And a lot of funds are being spent towards recovery. It is therefore worrisome that such amounts are biased towards responding to the recovery of the communities from disaster effects and not towards reducing the vulnerabilities of people and ecosystems. Meanwhile, years have passed with CSOs still lobbying the government to enact the Disaster Risk Management Bill to pave way for investment in disaster risk reduction. It is evident that fixing the economic system in order to create wealth for Malawians should include investments in the disaster risk reduction or management sector, where Malawians are losing a lot of their assets, a lot of their wealth, which obviously they've struggled to amass over the years. In addition, fixing the agricultural system to achieve food security for Malawians must include investment in strong infrastructure for harvesting the runoff water for irrigation purposes, rather than letting it loose and then destroying lives and livelihoods and property. Organizations and communities can implement climate change adaptation interventions, but there is a need for government to redirect focus from disaster risk response to disaster risk reduction. So Ruth and Julius had mentioned that this country does not put aside resources readily for preparedness and response. So normally we wait for a disaster to happen and then we scramble, we allocate resources from other budget lines so that we can use them, those resources for response. So we basically live on borrowed time. So what we're arguing here is that there's a need for proactive investment, I think as Ruth mentioned, in disaster risk management. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Just as he has already said, it is very expensive to respond and also to make people recover from the disasters than to reduce their vulnerability. And then, as we say so, we also call upon the stakeholders, including the CSOs and also government, to make sure that the key actors that are in the business of disaster risk management, that their capacity is strengthened. Because we do understand that indeed they play a key role in that circle. So we say these key players should play a role in ensuring that the community level as well as district level structures that have been put in place are well capacitated for the laws, the bill, and the policies provide for. The devolution plan should therefore be activated as soon as the bill is passed, and the decentralization of the functions in the department should already be underway to ensure smooth implementation of the bill, since disasters are emergencies that are not planned. You agree with me that indeed there are structures on the ground. We talk of village civil protection committees, area civil protection committees, district civil protection. These are key when it comes to issues to do with the disasters. And today, if you go to a village in Igaga, Chikwawa, Tie Chapananga, you gather some committees, you ask them, they will tell you they know nothing about the process on how they can report, but they just use the tradition. So we are saying, as we are pushing for the bill, we know there are clauses in the bill that are going also to be answering these questions, these issues. And we are calling upon all the stakeholders and also government and key actors in this disaster risk management to make sure that these have been capacitated for us to indeed reduce the vulnerability of the communities and also save the lives of the vulnerable people. And then another point that we are also emphasizing on is that indeed we should have an information management system for disaster risk management in Malawi. So government through DODMA and the EAD, as well as the CSOs working in climate change and the DRM, should ensure that they have developed a comprehensive information management system, IMS, to avoid providing conflicting information between the national level institutions and the decentralized levels on reporting DRM issues. The IMS will facilitate the collection, storage, organization, and dissemination of DRM information amongst stakeholders. It will also enhance the utilization of information for informed decision making, information analysis, and visualization, among others. The IMS will ensure that data and information are easily accessed through an integrated, decentralized IMS for transparency and the stakeholders. In the same line, disasters happen, and as the moderator already said, we also maybe experience some. She said we are expecting to have no less than 5. Surely, it's quite unfortunate that Malawi as a country, we don't have a comprehensive system that will indeed gather or capture information. You go to a community, you ask them how many people were affected by Cyclone Gombe, Cyclone Ana, they'll give you different figures from the information that you get at this level from the very same area. Meaning to say it's quite challenging for someone to tell or maybe to access exact figures or maybe to access the exact information that is happening on the ground. So what we are saying is the government and also CSOs should take that law. We have indeed said this, through DODMA and EAD, we need to set up this IMS system. I mean IMS, which will also be there to indeed provide information as regards to disaster risk management. So that's what we are saying. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, colleagues. Would now open up to members of the civil society network on climate change to also make a few contributions. So I'll start with DAP.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the issue of disaster risk management cannot be overemphasized, but as civil society under climate change, we are very concerned, as my colleagues have mentioned, that the bill is not yet in the parliament and not yet enacted. The issues of disaster risk management is the issues that are dealing with life and loss of properties. And we already know that the climate is changing, and we will never be away or will never cease to be experiencing disasters as long as the climate is changing. And we already know, and we don't need to be living in the era where we don't have information, and we think we don't have information, yet we have the information, and we know that the disasters, whether we like or not, will happen. And then we start thinking, okay, we wait for the disasters, and then it becomes very expensive. Okay, expensive not only in terms of monetary terms, but we are looking at the lives that we are losing every year, the properties that we are losing every year, and that how that is affecting the economy of the country. I think as civil society network on climate change, it's our plea to the government as well as the other stakeholders who are willing to contribute and also to support the coming in of the DRM Bill, so that we can be able to support the activities that are envisaged to be implemented in support or in implementing the DRM Bill. It will be very, very important for us as the nation that will be prepared and be able to respond to disasters when they occur, and that will minimize the losses and the damages that can come, and at the same time will be able to contribute to economic growth of Malawi as a country. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Enoch, for that contribution. I think basically from the contributions, the statements that have been made here, we have an understanding of where we are and where we stand as a country and why we need this bill finalized and enacted. And at this point, I would now open up to you as very important stakeholders in this matter of disaster risk management in the country. Possibly, if you could have questions, maybe areas where you need clarification, this is the time. So I now open up to you.
My name is Smart Chaliga from Kasupe Radio. Looking how the important is, looking at the bill you're talking about, Parliament will be meeting next year, that will be in February. What strategies have you put in place to make sure that this bill goes to Parliament next year and being tabled, keeping in mind there is no political will towards the bill? Thank you.
I'm Steve Pembamoyo from Nation Publications. Since you've indicated that today's meeting is aimed at roping in the media as one of the stakeholders. Now, from the background that you gave, it looks this battle began in 2013. By 2019, all the other steps had already been completed and submitted. But up to now, there is no bill. From what I've observed, it's like the battle has been fought from the perspective of the civil society. So my question or rather suggestion is, have you ever thought of, or is it in your plans, to at least maybe take the media, which is now a new stakeholder or a renewed stakeholder, to disaster hotspots, so that maybe from there they can get or record people's views on this? I'm suggesting this considering that some of these issues are inclined to politics. Once maybe say government hears it from people, they take it in a different understanding rather than just the CSOs lobby for. CSOs demand, CSOs this. So have we ever thought of, or is it in your plans to at least maybe engage the media through the disaster hotspots to assist those stories based on people's voices?
I'm Rav Mukomo from Ufur FM. You have given us a number of recommendations. We would like to find out when those recommendations are not met, what course of action are you going to take? Thank you very much.
Azo kwambiri nefunso langa ndifunsa nchichewa ine ndino Andrew Kazonda kuchokera ku Nthanda Times. Zikuoneka kunoti mmene mafotokozera kunoti kupewa kumaposa mwina kuchiza. Mafotokozaponso kuti pasamalowe ngati ndale. Mukuganiza kuti mwina kupewa kumene kukukhoza kugwira chifukwa kuti timatha kuona kuti anthu ena amatha kupindulirapo pa mavuto akamabwera. Nde mwina kuzingokhala ngati kukana. Mukuona kuti ndizogwira kuti mwina kupewa mene kuzathe kuchitika mdziko munomo ndipo ngati kutakhala kuti mwina kuti kukuvutabe inyo ngati mwina amabungwe ndi mwina pachinge ndi effort yotani imene mungadzakhazikise kunoti kupewa kumene kukudzapezeka.
Okay, in your statement, you mentioned that the government currently is losing a lot of resources in disaster-related expenses. And you said that the situation can only come to an end if the DRM Bill is enacted. In what way would the DRM Bill reduce the disaster-related expenses?
I'll take the first one from Kasupe Radio, but also the one from Nthanda Times. And I would request my colleagues to take the question from Nation Publications, or if you want, I can start, but I'll pass it to my colleagues as well. So on the issue, you have asked about strategy. What strategy is in place for the bill to be tabled in February 2023? I think that's how I took the question. Can you confirm? Yeah, so yes. Sometimes when you're in a battle, you don't disclose what strategies you want to take next. But I think you have seen that now we are getting a bit frustrated with the process, because I think for those that have been following, it has been a battle of private dialogue with government on different fronts. Most of the meetings that have been happening in the country regarding dialogue about disaster risk management bill, it has been the civil society supporting in one way or the other, and they know. And when I say that since the time 2013, 2014, 2015, Cisonecc and partners were actually supporting government to draft the bill itself. So actual drafting was actually happening with support from different stakeholders, including the civil society. So we know what is in the bill, the draft bill at the moment, and we know why maybe government is also doing some dilly-dallying, and that's the reason why we have not been talking about the issue of politicization over the years. We are actually starting to talk about it now because of the way we are seeing the whole process, diverging. Because at this moment, when when you have involved all the stakeholders, including government key departments, and then you come today and tell the civil society and all the citizenry at large to say that there is no bill, I think it's a mockery to the citizenry, because when you go through the process or you ask for records, you see that there are a lot of stakeholders that were involved, and they've in actually drafting those provisions. And then what does that mean to say there's no draft bill at the moment? It means people who were contributing never contributed anything. That's what we are taking from their statement as government. So already it's a mockery to the citizenry, it's a mockery to all the people that were engaged throughout the process to this point, for us to hear that statement from government, especially from the judiciary. And we hope they will open up within a very short period of time, that if they feel like there are still some gaps that will make it to be a bill or a draft bill, then I think they need to explain to us also why they what they want from the citizenry in order to contribute. So we want to actually still seek audience with the Minister of Justice in the shortest possible time, so that we understand their issues, and if there is need to strengthen that to come to a point where they'll call this is a draft bill, then I think we are ready to contribute as civil society in that respect. So that's one of the actions that we want to take, and make sure that this happens at least before January, so that we understand their issues, we support them, and then if anything, by end of January, we should be able to push them to actually submit this document to the to the cabinet committees, so that maybe February we can get it in Parliament. So we know the bill is already at a stage that can be enacted. Ruth also mentioned already, and I also pointed out that when I was reading the statement, this bill was in Parliament. I mean, was actually gazetted, not in Parliament. It was actually gazetted in 2019. So what does it mean, gazetted? It means it was already at a stage where it can be deliberated upon, and then it can be enacted into law. So when someone comes say it's not even a draft bill, I think that's a mockery. That was my point. The second question was from Tanda Times. Kupewa kumaposa kuchiza. Ndizotheka kupewa kuti kuta kuchizi kapena, what are the plans? Yes, fusolano ndabwino kwambiri. Kumbali ya ngozi ndizotheka kupewa. Kupewa sikutanthauza kuti you no longer have ngozeti, koma mutha kuchepetsa zopsezo. Kapena mutha kuchepetsa mutha kuwapangisa anthu kapena community nekuti ikhale ichilimiketi. Kuchilimika means ngozi itha kubwera, koma siononga katundu, siononga miyoyo ya anthu, siononga zinthu. Mutha kungoona kuti kunabwera chivomerezi mwachisanzo, kunabwera mvula ya mkuntho, komano mbewu zawo sizinawonongeke mwachisanzo. Inabwera tropical storm yoti mwina yagwetsa nyumba, koma nyumba zake nzochepa anthu sanamwalire. So that's a situation that imene tikuyang'ana tikamakamba za kupewa. Foti simungazipewe ngozi zija, foti ndi imene anafotokozera anzathu wa DAP. Ngozi zizi zipitirira kukhalapo, one, ndipo aboma akudziwa. A Department of Disaster Management Affairs akudziwaso. Chifukwa recent IPCC report, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, imene anafotokoza Ruth, ya chaka chomwe chino ya February, ikunena kuti tikupitaku ngozi zikhala zikupitirira kukulira mumphamvu komanso kuchuluka kuti zichitika. Ngati makhala ndi macyclone awiri pa chaka tizikhala ndi atatu, 4 or 5 as we go along. Meaning ngozi izi zopsezo zikhala zikuchulukira komanso zizitipasa mavuto ambiri. So izi kutanthauza kuti ife tikachilimika ndi tikapangisa kuti anthu achilimike, ecosystem yathu ichilimike, ndiye kuti ngozi zizichitika, macyclones azichitika, zopsezo zizikhalapo, koma tizikhala ndi mwina makachoti zochepa. So kumene tikuyang'ana ifeyo ndi kumeneko kuti tilowere direction imeneyo, kuti ngozi zikachitika zisamatipweteke kwambiri, tizikhala ndi mudzi, tikhale ndi ecosystem yoti izitha kupanga bounce back bwinobwino, kapena isamaononge zinthu zambiri. So I think that's what I can say. On the media tour, before I give it to my colleagues from Nation, I think what we can say is that maybe just also a correction. This is not the first time we are engaging the media. All along we've been working with the media. Only that we want this issue to also be profiled in a special way, because mwina pena zinthu zimatikuza ndi zinthu zina COVID-19 mwina yoka kamenya situkuziwa kuti kodi chenicheni chikupangisa kuti lese ngozi zathu samaje zinkazikukwerakwera ndi chani. Chifukwa kuti mwinaso pali malamulo amene sakutithandiza kuti zinthu zina zizipewa bwinobwino. So timafunabe kuti tingopitiriza kumagawana ndi anzathu a mediate kuti paliso ma issues awa okuti tithamathandizana kupanga profile, and that media tour is very important. I think we've done it before, not only Cisonecc, but also other partners, going to some of the districts, Jambulas, Tuzi, and, you know, taking and also profiling those as the case studies. Recently, I think we are doing some studies on loss and damage, where I think 3 or more studies have been done by different partners, but working also with the media to capture some of the issues, document them, put them in documentaries, but also write some articles and stories. So we can do that more, and we are also actually eager to do another media tour for people to appreciate. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Julius. I think just to extend on the issue which was raised by Ntanda, mwina kungofotokoza kwanzapo kunena kuti tikamakambaso kuti tikupewa ngakhale kuti ena kudyera pomwepo tikuyenanso tidziwe kunena kuti what we are looking at ndi moyo wa munthu wakumudzi. Zikhoza kunena kuti iye akupindula kuti tizipanga respond kuma floods kapena kuma disasters, koma nanga moyo wa munthu ukapita, as we are saying, anthu ambirimbiri ena anamwalira, awawa tikanatha kuwateteza kuti asamwalire, sitingabwezeretse moyo. So that means we have no option, komano kuti we should intensify on interventions zimene zikupanga build resilience ya anthu aja kuti asakhudzike kapena kuti asafike poti ngozi zikachitika ziwakhudze kwambiri. So in that sense, we are saying we should have this bill in place because it's a law. Imezathandizire mwanjira zingapo. And then media tours, yes. Takati kupita ku madero siyana, even when we were hit by cyclones, we had a media tour where we went to several districts to amplify the climate injustices that are being faced by the communities on the ground. And also not just to amplify, but also to call for more support and also more interventions. So that has been done. And we are not saying to Baba. I mean, if you will not have this bill in place, it means you have more options now, more players in this whole battle. So every one of us is important, and we need to work together so that we should achieve the goal. On the last question, I think I should go to that one. As in, how will this bill try maybe to answer some of the issues that we are raising here? Yes, the bill, it will be a law. And we have always said, indeed, there's a specific time whereby government is supposed to respond to the disasters. But that's not in practice in Malawi because we are guided by the policies, and most of the times we go respond and also rescue those that have been affected very late, after maybe some have already lost their lives. So if we decentralize this system that indeed resources should be coming from the district councils, it will be quick and also maybe will save some lives in the process. Another issue, there are some people that are living in very prone areas, I mean the disaster prone areas, and they are refusing to relocate. The law is also having some clauses whereby these are supposed to be forced to move out of such locations and to some areas whereby they will be protected and also maybe they won't be affected by the disaster. So there are several clauses that are in the bill. And when it's a law, it means, by all means, we have to go by that. So in the process, indeed, we'll try maybe to minimize some of the damages that we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Alon. I think I just also want to buttress the last interventions on the question how the bill, when it becomes law, it will help government reduce expenses. So the spirit of the suggested law makes emphasis on shifting the paradigm from disaster response and recovery to disaster preparedness. So there is a strong emphasis on preparedness. So what that does, it really mandates the government and other players to proactively invest in disaster proofing the various sectors of the economy, infrastructure and other things. So what that ultimately would do is to create more resilient ecosystems. As I think Alan mentioned that, in the law it will become clear that certain areas cannot be habited. So there will be a need to do a comprehensive risk assessment to understand where the major risk, disaster risk areas are, and then legislate that those cannot be used for human habitation, for example. So I think ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to prevent some of the needless damages that you see because, of maybe many years of neglect and many years, that has created a lot of vulnerabilities in our systems. So you see, for example, that once you just have maybe an instance of a particular, an episode of maybe a particular storm or something, you realize that maybe roads are being cut off, bridges are being washed away, because our infrastructure is not prepared, is not resilient enough to withstand some of the current and projected disasters that will result from climate-related changes. So a combination of this proactive investment in disasters will create a more resilient nation, which also I think is emphasized more in the Malawi 2063. So you are going to prevent some of the damages that we see, and hence instead of using a lot of risk, because response is expensive, you use a lot of money, and most of the times it's sort of money that just goes in the drain. You prevent that, and you can use those resources for other necessary sectors of our economy.